Hi, my name's Carol Ricard, and welcome to this episode of I Am Not Cancer. In case this is your first time tuning in, welcome. Thank you for joining us. I actually am a stage 3 cancer survivor, and I had an advantage going through my recovery journey because for 30 years I'd worked in hospitals teaching stress management to patients. And so, really, I had a full toolbox to use along my journey from diagnosis to getting through surgery to getting through chemotherapy. And not to mention the CAT scans, that come along the way. And so I started this show with a really simple mission, and that is to inspire you, it's to inform you, but also to empower you. And what that means is if you tune into some of our other episodes, I have actually interviewed survivors, stage 4 cancer survivors who were given a 4% chance of living, who are today, no evidence of disease in their body. Um, I have kind of interviewed some different professionals that I felt like could inform you in some of the choices that you make in your treatment journey. And then lastly is I will do shows where I'm actually teaching some of the similar things that I've taught my patients. And I'm really super excited today because there's been something I've been kind of working on and putting together, and that is this calming anxiety program. Um, and, I guess I just want to point out if you happen to notice, my book is finally been published. And so you can pick up a copy of this at Amazon, Barnes and Nobles, or you know what, go to your local bookseller. But what it is, it's really the blueprint that I used to sort of navigate in a calmer way. And I just want to point something out to you. You could probably read it in about 40 minutes. It's really meant to be a visual kind of a book. So it's really, really simple. All right. So just wanted to put a plug in there because that is kind of what led me to do this show as well. Um, but on today's show, what I want to talk about is anxiety, right? Now, whether you are going through cancer yourself or you're somebody who is supporting someone, a family member, a friend who is going through cancer, cancer, has a way of setting off all of the alarm bells. And on today's show, now, I have to confess, this is going to be a two-parter, okay? Because you don't want to miss it. Today, you are going to understand really what anxiety is and why you can do things about it. Now, you might have tried, right? When people tell you, oh, don't be anxious, or you got nothing to be anxious about, or just be calm or calm down. Guess what? What you're going to learn on today's show is that there's a certain kind of anxiety that it doesn't matter what your thinking brain is telling you, right? Or you try to tell it, or what your thinking brain tries to tell your body. It's not going to work because what you're going to learn is that there are two paths, to anxiety. And you have to be using the right tools in order to manage it, if that makes sense. Now, I am using PowerPoints today. Normally when I do my show, I kind of will teach and use my board, but today, too much information that I wanted your brain to just sort of see and be able to register. All right. And then now don't despair because you are going to walk away with a tool. In fact, I am going to share with you by the time we're done what I like to say is the anxiety extinguisher, right? We all know what a fire extinguisher is. It puts out the fire. Well, what I'm going to share with you today is something that we all have with us every moment of every day, and you can use it to actually extinguish your anxiety. All right. So, with that in mind, I am going to come over to my slide and hopefully, right, I'm going to be able to get it to kind of work. All right. So, I want to start with what I call Brainology 101. All right. Or we could have called this Anxiety 101. But what you really first need to understand is that our brains are hardwired for survival. All right. You don't get to stop your anxiety. You don't get to stop your stress. You can't do it. Our brains, 24 hours a day, are sort of wired to protect us, right? And what's really important is that we have three basic responses that our brain does. And most people are familiar with these. First, there's the fight, right? Then there's flight, and then there's freeze. Now, a lot of times what I found out is that, people are pretty familiar with the fight or flight, right? We've heard that so many times, whether it be in the news, maybe you've heard it from your doctors, maybe you learned it in school. But because I have been teaching this for 30 years, and more importantly, I live what I teach, what I discovered is there's actually a fourth F, um, and that is freedom. Now, this fight, flight, or freeze, it's really the way our brain responds when it detects danger. All right. So I could be ready to, fight, or maybe I'm just going to run away. We've heard this, right? Where the tiger shows up and we run, or the freeze. And that is, that rabbit, who actually, when they saw some sort of prey, just sort of froze so that they didn't see them. But the freedom is what I really am so passionate about sharing with people, because life is pretty amazing. We can't stop the anxiety, but I'm going to show you how you can calm it in order to have freedom from it, if that makes sense. So, the first path that our anxiety kind of comes from is called the amygdala. All right. And what ends up happening is it's this little thing way in the center part of our brain. You don't really have to know this, all right? But what you have to know is that we have this alarm center built into our brain. And what this is doing is it's first sensing danger. And it does this without you even thinking about it. So I don't know if you've ever been at a baseball game or you've been driving and all of a sudden the car in front of you slams on your brakes and then you slam on your brakes, right? And you do it without even thinking about it. But it also pays attention to events, and it's where we sort of kind of file emotional memories away. All right. And what it does is it then connects cues to these emotional memories. So let me give you an example. All right. Uh, I forgot. What I want you to understand is that our alarm center actually sends out signals to the rest of your body. So, to all the other systems in your body, that includes your heart rate, your breathing, your muscles, all right? Because it is kind of like danger, danger. It's like in a submarine when they kind of sense danger and all the alarms go off. And so it's all man the battle stations, right? Well, your body does this. And what's really important about this is that this pathway to anxiety, you can't think yourself out of it, all right? Isn't going to work. So here's an example, all right? Like to think of this as our autopilot. So what happens with our autopilot is, let's say I have an experience in my life where I get bit by a dog. So what my amygdala does is it files away this emotional memory that dogs are dangerous. And what then ends up happening is maybe the next time I see a dog, even if it's a friendly dog, right? And if you're somebody who's ever been bit by a dog, you know that people will tell you, oh, don't worry about it. My dog is so gentle, just so friendly. But guess what? Your brain is telling you something else because it's been filed away in this danger system. And what ends up happening then is the emotion of anxiety. All right. And so you can see that this really happens on an unconscious level. I think what's really important is for you to understand that our brain kind of works on two levels. Our brain works on two levels. There's the conscious, right, which is what you are aware of, it's what you're thinking. But then the second level is the unconscious. And the way I like to explain this is it's sort of like the ocean, all right, where you can have the waves coming towards you, and what you see is telling you one thing, right? Like, come in the ocean. But what ends up happening is there may be this rip current underneath, and the current underneath the waves, right below what we see, could be going in a different direction. And sometimes that's what happens to our brain. So even if you're saying to yourself, friendly dog, don't go there, you're okay, Carol. Guess what? The current underneath is saying, danger, danger. And so your whole body is responding to that danger. Okay. So that is actually, anxiety path number one. That brings us to anxiety path number two, which is really our cortex, or that is our thinking brain, right? This is what really separates us as human beings from any other species that it is, because we have this just tremendous capacity for thinking. And this part of our brain, it too pays attention to sights and sounds. All right. It also, though, can kind of create its own thoughts and worries. So there's the external, right, that we sort of notice, but then we also create these things internally. And that can be our thoughts, right? So what I want to give you an example of this is the event is I see a fire truck. All right. Then what ends up happening is my thinking brain creates this interpretation, right, of that event. And maybe my interpretation is my house is on fire. And then immediately it goes to the emotion, which is the anxiety. All right. Now, we may not get to control the events, but what we do get to work on is our interpretation. And if you've ever heard of cognitive behavior therapy, this is an excellent therapy and has been very effective for people whose anxiety kind of generates out of those thoughts and those worries. All right. I know that this has actually happened to me. What has ended up happening was, um, oh, wait, I want to go back. All right, you guys, I'm trying to get back over here so you can see me. So I know that this has happened to me before. One time I was in California and I had a dog that had to have seizure medicine like 5 times a day. All right. And so I had arranged for a girlfriend to come visit the dog and give her medicine at 2 p.m. in the afternoon. So I called my house around 2 p.m. from California, and she didn't answer the phone. I called her phone, right? And nobody answered. No, actually, it was my phone. She was staying here because I went away a couple times and actually had to take care of the dog. But I like to get all confused in my brain, which is why interpretations, you have to be careful of them because they're not always real or accurate, right? So I called my house. She wasn't there. And all right, I call back 5 minutes later. And then I call back 10 minutes later. And after the third call, like it was like 2:30 and I didn't get an answer. I began to think, oh no, something happened and she's not there. And my dog didn't get her medicine, and therefore she's going to have a seizure. And oh my God, because then she's going to have to take her to the animal. And then it just was, all right. Thank goodness I kind of caught myself. All right. But I didn't catch myself after I called my neighbor to go over to my house to just check on things. And of course, my girlfriend was there, right? But I guess she just didn't want to answer my phone. But, anyways, I had to catch myself the next time my brain started to interpret and say, Carol, maybe she's outside with the dogs, right? So that's what cognitive behavior therapy is that we interrupt the pattern by catching the false interpretation. All right. Now, I want to come back because you know what? This is a really important kind of thing to understand as well. All right. That it's the domino effects, just like I shared with you. What ends up happening is that once that interpretation happens, or once my amygdala senses danger, well, it sets off this chain of events. And I want you to understand that how the two paths work. So let's start with the amygdala, which I put in red because to me that's danger, right? So our brain gets that sensory, information. Our eyes, our ears, our nose, like anything. It goes to this little part of our brain, right, which is kind of grand central station. And then that knows that, oh my God, danger. It sends it right to our amygdala, which then sends it right to our anxiety. And that's the response. That's the survival response that we end up having. So, what I want you to take away from this is that anxiety is meant to protect us. All right. Just sometimes it kind of doesn't protect us, it overprotects us, right? Nowadays. But the other pathway is, all right, cortex, which our thinking brain. And from there, it too goes to the thalamus, but it's like, okay, no danger. So it sends it, to the cortex and says, all right, it could take this path. But here's the thing, the cortex then goes to the amygdala, which then, again, guess what? Goes to anxiety, right? And so those are kind of like the chain reactions that end up happening. If you think about it, our brain and how it does this, I like to call it brain talk, but simply put, what you need to understand is that in our brain, we have a gazillion neurons. I think they're like trillions of little communication, right? Things that take place in our brain. And what happens is they call these the synapse. And again, you don't need to understand, but I really want you to kind of have a working understanding of how your brain is working. So it's sort of communicating through the ends of these neurons called synapses. And here's what's most important is that the neurons that fire together wire together. So we've all recently heard, probably over the last, at least 5 years, that our brain can change. Of this thing called neuroplasticity. And this is what happens because we can actually change and strengthen and create new wiring in our brains. Here's how it happens. So, example, the fire truck, I see it, it goes to my interpretation, and then it goes to my anxiety. But what ends up happening is that the more times it gets bigger, and then those connections get stronger, and then they get stronger. And so the point of this is that it kind of takes on a life of its own, but it doesn't mean that we still can't do anything about it, right? The question you have to ask yourself is it helping you or hurting you, right? And if your anxiety is hurting you, if it's stopping you from being able to do things, if it's stopping you from being able to be around people, you know what? If it's really challenging you as you're going for your chemotherapy or for your surgery. I guess I want you to have hope because there's ways that we can interrupt it. And how we can do that really simply is using dominoes, right? Remember, I told you that there's this chain reaction that takes place in our brain? Well, guess what? We can interrupt that domino effect, believe it or not. So we kind of eliminate or create an interruption so that the dominoes then, this one goes on to fall, but the other two, it stops, if that makes sense to you. Now, I like to call it the freedom framework, all right? Because it's really, remember I told you, the fourth F is freedom. We can't stop it, but we can actually do something to manage it. So it's kind of a three-parter. There's your mindset, right? There's what I call your tool set. And then there's your action set. And right in the middle, where all of these three parts come together, is really the freedom zone. And for me, that was actually what I was able to kind of utilize as I really navigated through this cancer journey. Um, and so, what I want to just share with you and kind of give you a sneak peek on is I came up with this therapy about 20 years ago. And I came up with this therapy. Well, let me tell you how I came up with this therapy. All right. And that is, all right. All right. Sorry, you guys. Okay. Oh, all right. Guess what? I'm going to have to tell you how I came up with this therapy. All right. And sorry about that, but this is technology, and I have to tell you all is I am not the greatest technology person. Okay, I figured it out. All right. So 20 years ago, all right, there once was a time I did not live what I teach. In fact, 20 years ago, I had the job of my dreams. In fact, I felt guilty because I got paid to go to work. That was how much I loved my job at the hospital. However, 6 months on the job, 3 weeks in a row, I ended up in my doctor's office with migraines. Finally, the third week, I should point out that these happened on Thursdays, right around 2 p.m. in the afternoon. And the third visit, he finally said to me, Carol, what's got you so stressed out? Now, I was super embarrassed because here I was teaching my patients to manage stress, but I wasn't doing a very good job on my own. And this is where I learned stress management won't work all by itself. And I feel bad because so many people are doing what I did. I would go to the gym after the work. I would try to eat healthy. I actually would spend time outside with my dogs, right? All the things that we learn in stress management. But I would do those things once I got home from work. The problem was my migraines would hit at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And so what I realized, and part of my reason for just not doing anything during the day was because I was so busy. I barely had time to go to the bathroom. I would eat my lunch at my desk, right? Coworkers I knew could go outside on their lunch hour and go for a walk. And if you could do that, that is really good to do. But I actually then had to do something because I realized that whatever job I went to, the stress was going to be the same, especially in hospitals, right? Where you don't get to control what happens. So I started using the tools I was teaching my patients, and I would use them for just 30 seconds or 60 seconds. And that led me to this discovery. And the discovery is that if I did that, even just a little bit, right, I actually didn't have a migraine the very next week. And I can't tell you, because I get the kind where I'd have to come home from work, I would be throwing up, I would have to climb into bed, you know what, shut off all the lights, and then really hoped that by the morning it kind of ended up going away. So what I'm going to share with you is really kind of what I call the secret. And I call this therapy actually rapid relief therapy, because it has the power to bring you rapid relief. So what it is that at 10 o'clock in the morning, when I was feeling, completely overwhelmed, right? And starting to feel anxious, I could take action instantly to reduce my anxiety and my stress. And how I did that was kind of using a tool. And that tool is what I call the calm code. All right. Now, that is going to be a little bit of my cliffhanger, because that's what we're going to come back and talk about in the next episode. What is this code? What are the 4 steps that you can follow to kind of create a calm out of the chaos that you're feeling in your life? All right. So, but what I want to help you understand, though, is before we go, what is the extinguisher that we all have? And it can work for the amygdala anxiety. So, you ready for this? It is, what is the one thing you have? No, everywhere you go, every minute of every day, it's your breath. And so you may have heard that breathing is good for us, but what I want you to do is there's a couple ways I want you to practice your breathing. All right. When you breathe in, I just want it to be nice and slow. Doesn't matter if it's your nose or your mouth. Don't worry about that. But as you breathe in, take 5 seconds to breathe in a nice, good breath. So as you're breathing in, you're counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then, as you naturally just let it exhale, count and let it out slowly. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's it. In, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then out, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now, it might seem like, how in the heck is that going to work, Carol? But trust me, because what happens is it actually turns on the part of our brain that sort of then is what kind of they call the relaxation response, right? And it is really as simple as paying attention to your breath. And if you could do just 5 or 6 of those breaths at different points, especially when you feel the anxiety starting to overwhelm you, I promise you that that will work for you. That was what I would do during a CAT scan. That, and then a couple other tools I'm going to share with you in the next episode. So believe it or not, that is all the time that we have for today. I want to invite you to come back to the next episode, where I'm going to share with you the calm code. And what it allows you to do is unlock the calmness that we all have inside of us that's sort of buried under that anxiety and that stress. Join us on Facebook at Facebook.com/I Am Not Cancer. And you can catch replays of other episodes at IamNotCancer.live. So thank you so much for joining me, and I'll see you in the next episode.